Ponownie Neal Ford, wykład nosi tytuł Essence and Ceremony. Brawo.
Thank you. Well, this is a very different talk than most of the talks that you've seen today. This is actually a keynote that I did at several other conferences, so it feels a lot more keynotey than a regular technical session, but it has a lot of technical stuff in it anyway, and it has some source code in it and that sort of stuff. But I've done a lot of research on this particular topic, and I have found that I get much better speaker evals if I show this as the first image. Now, demographically, this is a pretty safe image to show, but I want to cover all my bases, and so the second image I'm going to show is that one. Although it looks like demographically we don't even need this one in this particular group because I think it's all just guys. So what I'm going to do in this talk is pull together several different threads of recent history and explain why some things have been happening in the software development world, particularly around this idea of ceremony and essence. And I'm going to start with some history. And really, you can sum up this whole talk by this famous quote by Santayana: "Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Normally, when you think about ancient philosophers, you think about them thinking about great thoughts about society and philosophy and all those other things, but they also had some really great insights into software development as well. And in the software world, we have lore that we don't pay enough attention to. And that's a big problem in software. We always think that the cool stuff is in front of us and all the stuff behind us is old stuff, but that's not true. This is part of the lore of software. This is a really, really good book, even if you don't care anything about Smalltalk, because these were the first guys to really do object-oriented programming for real. And they came up with a lot of really interesting stuff. Or this book, which was written in 1975, and you can read it today, and pretty much everything he says in there is still applicable. Not the stuff about mainframes, but the stuff about project management is still dead on, which just shows me that we never learn in software. This is another book that's part of the lore of software, that if you're really serious about being a software developer, you owe it to yourself to read Pragmatic Programmer by Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas. But I'm going to go back further. I'm going to go back a lot further and talk about how philosophy applies to software, and I'm going to start with this guy, Plato. Plato developed this doctrine of ideas. It was one of the things that Plato came up with. Let me give you an example of this. When you go to a McDonald's, you look on the little board behind the cash register at McDonald's, and you see this. And you go, ooh, that looks pretty good. I think I'll have a #1 Big Mac meal. But then when you bring it back to your table, this is what you actually have. And you think to yourself, what is the relationship between the picture that I saw and the thing I'm holding in my hand? Well, the picture was the class, and this is an instance of the class. And something went terribly wrong during the construction process. It was some memory leak or some exception got thrown somewhere near the lettuce machine or something like that. So really, when you think about it, Plato invented object orientation. He invented this idea of classes and objects and instances of objects. That's really what the doctrine of ideas was about. And it really only took us about 2,300 years to incorporate that into software. So we're doing pretty good so far. 2,300 years? Well, not too bad. But the other thing that Plato did that was not so great was he thought that the best way to understand things is to sit and think about them really hard. And whatever you came up with, that must be the solution, because I sat and thought about it really, really hard. And it took a time to get away from that mode of solving problems. And that's the first one of the little threads that I'm pulling together, this Platonic style of thinking. One last thing about Plato, he would have hated JavaScript because, it's prototype-based, not object-based. I'm sorry, the jokes don't get a lot better than this, so, you're going to have to work with me here on these kind of jokes. The next one up is Aristotle. Aristotle was really amazing because he attacked virtually every problem of his day. In fact, he was the tutor of Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great, when he became, the Great, built this school for Aristotle. And he attacked all these different problems. These are all volumes that he wrote, between 400 and 1,000 volumes of text, and he founded a lot of what we call scientific disciplines now. And what's really amazing is he did it without equipment. He basically had a compass and a ruler, and that was it. He came up with things that you would think you would have to have a microscope to come up with, but he did. And for our purposes, one of the things that he developed was logic. And one particular aspect of logic I'm interested in is this distinction between the essential properties of something and the accidental properties of something. So you have essential and accidental properties. The essential properties are the things that are the characteristics of this object, and the accidental properties are the things that just happen to be true about it. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you have 5 boats and they all have sails. You cannot you can say that the essential property is conveyance across water because they're all boats. You cannot make the logical leap and say that all boats have sails. That is just an accidental property of the boats that you happen to have in front of you. So that is not a logical conclusion that you can make. And to us, this seems really obvious. We would never, ever make this mistake in 2009 when we're thinking about something. Or maybe we would. But I'll come back to that. Because next I want to talk about Galileo. And Galileo is a classic kind of never believes anything anybody tells him. If you told him the sky was blue, he would go outside and say, no, it is not in fact blue, it's gray. I've never actually seen a blue sky in Krakow. I've been here a couple of times now, and it always seems to be the same shade of gray when I've been here. But he didn't believe anything anybody told him. He wanted to try stuff out. And in fact, one of the things that Galileo came up with is a question you could ask most 5-year-olds. That if you took a bowling ball and a golf ball and dropped them, which one would hit the ground sooner? Up until Galileo's time, a bunch of scientists had thought really hard about this problem and said, oh, well, the heavier thing will fall faster. There's no reason to try it because I sat and thought about it really hard, and I'm sure the heavier one will fall faster. But Galileo didn't buy that, so he went up on the top of the Tower of Pisa, and he made ramps, he dropped stuff off on people's heads. He did all these experiments and showed that, in fact, if you discount wind resistance, which is minor for those objects, they fall at exactly the same rate. What Galileo did was show us that some things are counterintuitive. They don't work the way you think they might work. You should probably try them sometime. And that's pertinent to us because a lot of non-intuitive things happen in software, so much so that we have developed a special name for the non-intuitive things that happen in software. We call those things anti-patterns. In fact, there's a wiki out there, the C2 Anti-Patterns Wiki. If you do a Google search for Anti-Patterns Wiki, you'll find it. And there are a few of them. So I want to talk about just a few of these. See if you've encountered any of these on any of the projects that you've been on. One of them is called dead end and is Klangbird, which is where you have a design team that's stuck in analysis paralysis and management won't allow them to stop working on this disastrous thing they're working on. So they know it's never going to come to fruition, but you've already spent all this time on it, so you need to keep working on it. It's called Klangbird because there's a mythical bird that when it's looking for prey flies in great big circles, and it gets tighter and tighter circles until it finally accidentally flies up its own ass and disappears with a loud clang. And I've definitely been on that project. Another one of these anti-patterns is the give me estimates now anti-pattern, which is where a client or a pointy-haired boss demands estimates before you know anything about it. It's like, I want estimates on that. It's like, I don't know. I've never built one of those. I've never seen one of those built. I don't even know if you can build that thing. Well, I just need some estimates for, just general estimation purposes. And as soon as you give them